Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is for 350 for rhetoric. For those of you taking all three of my classes this semester, I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. The last time that we met, we talked a little bit about the Dark Ages, what they meant, and what St. Augustine did. And we know that he really helped rhetoric stick around during the Dark Ages, but there were also Islamic monks who helped. There were also other people who were preserving in the Eastern cultures, were preserving Western texts and scrolls, and so we owe a great deal of thanks to those, excuse me, who actually preserved the texts, and as well as Saint Augustine and Margaret Fell and Christine de Pizan, who also saved rhetoric by telling us where it could be applied when the Catholic Church told us it couldn't be applied at all except in the church. So, what was going on during the Dark Ages that rhetoric needed this saving? Like, why did it almost die? In the Greek times, we had philosophy or the search for truth versus rhetoric. During the Roman period, we had power versus rhetoric and that relationship. And then during the Middle Ages, we had people saying rhetoric is evil, do not practice it. Why? Well, there's many reasons why the church considered rhetoric evil. One of those reasons was because, much like Plato, they believed that it could sort of mutate or change or modify the truth. And that's bad. And the Catholic Church particularly believed that was bad at this time because they were in charge of everything. They were even in charge of what truths existed and what was true. And mostly it was, if it's not in the Bible, it's not true. But the Pope got to decide what was true and what was not true in the Western world. And if you didn't like it, if you weren't a part of the Catholic Church, there were big problems for you heading your way. So Eastern and Western cultures were greatly divided at the time. We didn't learn anything from Eastern cultures like we should have. In fact, we didn't learn anything at all because we were not using our empirical talents to do that. What does empirical mean? It means that we can use our senses to know or to experience something in order to describe it. That is to say, use rhetoric to share it with the world when we gain new knowledge. So we know our five main senses, right? There's sight, smell, hearing, taste, and feeling, right? We know all that. We know those five, and we're like, that's all you have. The sixth sense is some metaphysical, like, crazy thing. Not true. We also have senses of time. We have a sense of space. Some of us have illnesses that require that actually destroy our ability to know where our body is all the time. So you'll see me run into the corners of tables on a regular basis, and I'm not talking like your average klutz. Okay, that's definitely a thing for some people, but no, I'm talking about like it's part of my illness is that I can't remember the name of it either. Don't ask me, but it describes the idea that I don't know where my body is at any given time in portion to other objects and items, and therefore I'm more likely to run into them. So we have way more than just five senses, but using those five senses to answer scientific questions is known as empirical data, that which we can see, feel, taste, sense in one of the five ways. Okay, so the church was like, forget that. What we need to know is what God tells us is the truth, and that's the only thing that we need to share. And of course, Eastern worlds were moving far, or Eastern parts of the Eastern cultures, excuse me, were moving far further than we were at the time, and for like what 800 to 1600 years, depending on which historian you talk to. So it was a long time that people were living on fiefs, that they were tilling that land for literally generations, that they may never have stepped outside of a mile radius of where they lived, that they didn't experience any other like culture at all, obviously, even their own. Okay. The other thing is that knowledge that the church kept was based on a caste system, really, if you think about it, of, the richer you were, the closer to the church you were, and therefore the more knowledge you had. And that got handed down. I mean, lords and ladies of the court were seen as more knowledgeable, definitely, than those who were on work in the fief, right? So your indentured servants were the lowest of the low, and they did not need to know too much. In fact, you want to keep them from knowing too much, because if they know too much, then they're going to ask questions. And if they ask questions, they might realize this is not right and things would not be okay. So, in order to keep them, to keep this system, this feudal system in order, they did it for the purpose of maintaining that system. All right, so you could tell I'm doing this at like 5 in the evening because the sun is setting and my light is now showing a shadow. I apologize. I'll be keeping this fairly brief anyway. In addition to that, the church did not want that knowledge challenged. A second reason why rhetoric was considered evil was because it came from pagans. I mean, even St. Augustine was a pagan before he turned to the church. So it was pagan, therefore it was evil. Another reason was because it, and I'm quoting here, aroused the passions. Now, that does not mean sexually necessarily. I guess it could. Good debater syndrome, or you see somebody who's really powerful speak and you think you're romantically or physically attracted to that person. I don't know, but they were talking more about arousing the passion in you to fight for something, to fight against power, or to want power for yourself, to crave it. Those were the kinds of passions that they were talking about. Another reason why it was considered evil was because who was the first in the Bible to use rhetoric for the purpose of deceit, or to use communication for the purpose of deceit, to literally change all of humanity, which was a population of 2, but it literally changed all humanity. According to the Bible, that person would be not a person, it would be Lucifer, the angel, who fell and was banished from heaven and fell into hell, and who turned himself into a serpent for the purpose of tricking Adam and Eve into getting kicked out of the garden. He was jealous of them, and he didn't want them there. He wanted only God to be there, and him and the angels, I guess. I'm not really sure on all that. I've never really done a psychological analysis of Satan. But there were a lot of motivations for him to do what he did, right? And what did he do? He tempted, he tricked, he lied. All those things that people associate with the word rhetoric. He did all those things to get Adam and Eve to eat a quince. Okay, we call it an apple, but it was a quince. It's a different type of fruit. To eat fruit from a certain tree. And that tree was known as, that's right, the tree of knowledge. Now, some of you might be like, dude, never read the Bible, have no idea what you're talking about. Hopefully by now you've heard the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, which at this point, it is a cultural narrative, basically, that we use, in my case, for educational purposes, because at that time in the 400 AD or 400 CE to, the 1500s, 1400s, at least the 1100s, this is what they believed. And guess what? If you're eating from the tree of knowledge and you know that you're not God, now you want to hide yourself. Now you want to fix God's creation in some way, that you fall short. Or it may make you prideful and you want to know more than God does, and that would be bad. Now, Adam and Eve were not kicked out of the garden because they ate from the tree of knowledge and they gained knowledge and therefore had to go. That's not how that story goes. They were banned from the garden because they disobeyed God. It's kind of like my father used to say, I only have a few rules in this house. Why do you have to break that one? The one rule I don't want you to break. Why'd you break it? I never got kicked out of the house, thank God. But Adam and Eve did. And the story goes on from there. And they were ashamed. And why was a serpent used? Well, I don't know why it was used at the time. I mean, if it's a true story, that would be why. If it's a fictional narrative that's meant to teach a lesson, I don't know why. But it's possible that this is the link between a snake and a deceptive person, right? When we talk about, that person's a snake, what we're saying is they'll deceive you, they'll trick you, they'll lie to you. You don't want to be with them. They slide on the ground and they look like they're slippery, slimy. They're not, but they look that way. Or they are sliding on the ground so they can sneak up on you because they're super quiet, right? And not only can they sneak up on you, but they will look like they're going to pass you by until they turn and they just, you know, bite you, by shooting. Well, shooting is the wrong word. By their head coming forward, and I can't think of the word I'm looking for. They come out at you. They bite you. They may poison you. The bite itself may tear your flesh. And of course, if you're a leopard gecko who thinks you're a snake and you try to bite, I'll just laugh at you because you have no teeth, right? But snakes are dangerous. So it's not like, oh, the leopard gecko is the symbol of evil. No, it's the snake, because they trick you into thinking that they are peaceful and calm animals, and then they attack you when you are least knowledgeable. Or at least, I guess the better word is you're least aware and unlikely to know that they're coming for you, right? That's why in Hogwarts, one of the houses is Slytherin. It's called Slytherin because what do snakes do? They slither, and snakes are evil. And Nagini was a part of Voldemort, who belonged to Slytherin. And if you haven't read or watched the Harry Potters, I apologize, because my husband and I, we belong to Slytherin, both of us actually. He's a much kinder version than I am, I think sometimes, but we're both Slytherins, and we have sweaters. We have the school sweater that match saying Slytherin on them for each of us. That's how far into that we went. My daughter is also 11, and she belongs to Ravenclaw because, of course, she does. And she told me I should because I'm as smart as an owl. I don't. That doesn't make me feel very good. Have you ever seen an owl? Like, I realize they're related to intelligence, right? And snakes are related to lying. And so perhaps I should rather be an owl than a snake. But alas, my personality tends to be a little bit of a trickster, tends to be a little bit more interested in sarcasm than in, spouting actual truths to people all the time. And I like to have fun with language. All those things are a part of the snake-like qualities of a Slytherin. Okay. We're also exceptionally loyal. So there is that. But on the other hand, that idea of a snake being evil, maybe it came to us because Satan was evil and Satan did tempt Eve as a snake. Or maybe we see those creatures and we think of them as sneaky and as likely to attack you, and as deceptive in nature. Whichever way it goes, we know that the first entity to use rhetoric for the purpose of lying was Satan. So there's at least 5 reasons going into your readings in the medieval period and coming out of them into the Enlightenment, 5 reasons why they thought rhetoric was evil, and therefore they wouldn't talk about it. They would not teach it. And also, the other thing is too, to be honest with you, it maintained their class system as well, because if you had less knowledge, you had less power. And if you had less power, the less likely you were to challenge the king, like in Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings. Take your pick. It's been around forever, right? Now, Augustine was not the only one who saved rhetoric, although he's a major player because he taught us how to use it in the church. But we also had, yes, Christine de Pizan and Margaret Fell. Margaret Fell talking about women speaking in the church specifically. Christine de Pizan talking about speaking in the court specifically. Yes, that is all true. We also had, like I said, monks preserving the texts. And we had, during the late part of the Dark Ages, some people might ask, how did we get to the Enlightenment? And that question actually has a lot to do with a group of people who identified themselves as humanists. Humanists did not necessarily believe they're greater than God. That's not really what they do. I think the book might represent it properly, but some people say, oh, you're a humanist. You believe that, either there is no God and you're greater than everything, you're at the top of the food chain, that you have the most knowledge, or that, it's a pride thing. And that's not the answer. The answer to that is that a humanist is someone who believes that human beings can find out truths for themselves. So we don't have to rely only on the Bible which was written by many people over a certain period of time that you may or may not accept as true. Okay. So if we view the Bible as truth or we view it as a source of story and narrative, either way, it can be useful, but it is not the only thing. We don't get knowledge only from God. We have ignored the human experience up until this point. And so the humanists brought that in. And so as people began to accept that human experience was as important to knowledge as anything else, as the Bible and as the church and the Pope, then we started to gain more knowledge and we started to reorganize societies, and governments were built on language. So if you knew the language, you could do it, right? You could actually, um, fight for things that you wanted in society. You could see other societies. You could learn from different cultures. So once we accepted that human beings were capable of that, then we were able to move on into learning. And that's where the Age of Enlightenment comes in. And the Age of Enlightenment is just, every time I talk about it, I'm like the Dark Ages and then the Age of Enlightenment. Oh, look, there's, bright colors and a light bulb went on somewhere and the sun came out or whatever. However you visualize it, it was because we were willing to learn and we were willing to spread that knowledge vis-a-vis rhetoric, and in order to help people to be better humans, better citizens, better workers, whatever it was that we needed to share that knowledge. And so the Enlightenment, we're going to experience some people who talk about rhetoric only as an art. We're going to have others who talk about it as a science, as a way of reasoning the truth. Okay. And still others who will talk about rhetoric as pretty language, not just an art, but an empty art at that. So the battle of rhetoric, the aesthetic or artistic, and science or reason, which during the Enlightenment we really mixed science and reason. We use those words interchangeably. It's probably not important that you know why, but do know that when we say reason, we're talking about what they believed to be the scientific method at the time, which of course mostly came from Bacon. Yes, I'm hungry now too. So we will see a debate between Bacon and Vico. We will engage with people who are in the church who still believe that we should study philosophy and learn. And you will see yet other people who say rhetoric belongs to speech makers. That's it. That's all they should do. They're sophists, and that's it. And that guy, Peter Ramus, really caused us all a lot of trouble even now, right? Because that's where that split of rhetoric is empty, flowery language, and rhetoric is meaningful and can help shape our interpretations of things really split off, okay? And they don't come together until a little bit later down the line. So that's what you're headed into. I will be doing videos where I talk about these philosophers separately. Okay. But I just wanted to give you an idea of what we were heading into. When we talk about the Enlightenment, it's a lot bigger than you might think. All right. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know. My email is better, although a student emailed me and it went straight to my bulk mail. And I found it, luckily. I've been better about checking things. But if you need me, text me. You have my number. And I will be in touch with you all very, very soon.